At Ford of Murfreesboro, we have an off-site quick lane service center which offers the Works package, which is an oil change and a tire rotation, any make or model, for $24.95. At Ford of Murfreesboro, we offer a lifetime warranty on all new Ford vehicles, including Roush vehicles. We also offer a lifetime warranty on brake pads through our quick lane and our service department. Ford of Murfreesboro is a 2013 recipient of Ford Motor Company's President's Award, which is only awarded to the top service and sales satisfaction dealers in the country.
Welcome back to the Tennessean's Bernard Pollard Show. We're here live at Moe's Barbecue in Cool Springs. We are presented, of course, by Sleep Outfitters. And we're going to spend this next segment talking a little bit about last week's loss and kind of the repercussions of that. And then spinning forward, of course, to next week and the matchup they have against the Jaguars. I think I kind of wanted to start off talking to you, David. You had a pretty strongly worded column after the loss last week, and I'd like you to give us kind of your take on that.
Yeah, to me it's one of those games, if you play that well in the first half, John, how do you explain what happens in the second half? And to me, there's something almost systemically wrong with a franchise that can't follow a 28-3 lead and put the game away. And that's what I wrote, and I appreciate Jess mentioning it. You can still see it at Tennessean.com.
There you go.
Right? But it was like the best of times, worst of times, and I know Ken Wisenhunt's talked about, we know it's in there because we saw it at Kansas City, we saw it in the first half of the Cleveland game, but it's a 60-minute game. How do you explain that? And beyond that, how do you overcome the residue of that second half? Or can you?
Yeah, it's certainly going to be a challenge for the Titans coming into this week. But, you know, I think if you break it down, you know, there were certainly a few things you could point at as things that went wrong. I think one of the things was the Titans got away from a running game, you know, especially later in the game, that had been pretty successful. Not great, but pretty successful. They got away from that, which could have potentially killed some clock, could have helped them out. So I think that hurt them. On defense, I thought the pass rush fell apart. There was no pass rush whatsoever outside of Michael Griffin's sack on the first series. And if you have no pass rush, Brian Hoyer just stood back there and took his time and found receivers and had no problem, making completions time and time again. So I think there's certainly a couple of problems. One other that comes to mind is, you know, the Titans this year have had big problems on third down. They're the worst team in the league on third downs. In the first half, they set things up pretty well, so the third downs weren't necessarily too long. You know, they were doing pretty well converting them. Second half, they ran into the 3rd and 10s, the 3rd and 8s, 3rd and 9s, and you're just not going to go very far doing that. And so I think those are kind of three of the problems, but there are more than that. When you lose a 25-point lead in just over 2 quarters, there are more problems than just that.
And I thought Cleveland gave a little lesson that maybe Ken Wisenhunt and the staff should pay attention to, like they're wanting my advice. But the Browns are down, and they still ran the ball. When you're down multiple scores, you don't have to abandon the run game. And I think because they were able to run it, that kept the pass rush at bay. They didn't worry about running too much clock because they're still able to throw it. To me, that's something maybe the Titans need to get back to. They've run it well at times, really run it pretty well most of the season thus far. Should they stay with the run game, maybe even accentuate it a bit, especially with a little uncertain situation at quarterback?
Yeah, and certainly uncertainty at wide receiver as well. Mm-hmm. We've seen some good performances at wide receiver, some not so good performances at wide receiver. But, I think, you know, it was interesting to see Bishop Sankey get some earlier carries last week. You know, he's a guy with a lot of potential. Didn't have quite the impact that he had in previous games, but I think he's a guy that's going to see more and more action as the season goes on. I think a question mark too, though, is the offensive line when you talk about the running game. In some instances, it's been good, but the offensive line, I think, for what it's cracked up to be, has not necessarily done its part this year. And Ken Wisenhunt pointed out specifically the other day on the quarterback sneak, mm-hmm. you know, when you need a foot, 2 feet, for a first down that could potentially clinch the game, and you can't get there, and it's probably because of your line. That's not a really good signal about the talent or not necessarily about the talent, but the execution of that offensive line.
And they've invested greatly in that line, both in free agency and certainly in the draft. It just isn't playing up to where it should. Now on the sneak, and I've been critical of the call, I think you punt the ball away right there.
I agree.
We were in the press box. I think we said the same thing to each other as they were determining whether to go for it or not. I just think as poorly as your defense has been playing, you've got Cleveland down to one timeout. You punt them deep. Kern had punted well, pinned them well much of the game. So that's second guessing. But beyond that, a quarterback sneak. Now I know, again, Ken Wisenut said he played the percentages, rolled out those numbers for us in the media yesterday. But I wonder about, are we talking about quarterback sneak on 4th and 1, or as opposed to a running back carrying the ball? I just thought that's why you brought Sean Green in, among other things. Give the ball to a short yardage back there. He liked the call. He says, looking at the TV replay, he thinks Whitehurst made it. The officials didn't, review didn't. I'd give the ball to a running back there. What about you?
Yeah, not only do you have Sean Green, but there's also, if you want to bring in a Jackie Battle, too.
Yep.
Here's a guy who's a kind of a short yardage specialist, who's a bruiser. Either have him carry the ball, or he's a fullback, too. Maybe help out with the blocking as well. So I think that, that was another option as well. But, I'm sure that the Titans want to forget last Sunday's game. So maybe, another opportunity awaits. Certainly it does this Sunday against Jacksonville. And we remember last year, a winless Jacksonville team came to Nashville at 0-8 and beat the Titans that year. And I think as much as any game that killed the Titans season, they were 4-4 at the time. They had just beaten the Rams, and things were going pretty well.
It really looked like they were on the uptick because they had one in St. Louis and played pretty good. Jake Locker did not play well in that game, but I thought they played very well. So it's an uptick. You've got poor old Jacksonville coming to town. I think in the NFL, one of the great motivators is over. Nobody wants to be over. And if you're Jacksonville, you played poorly. They haven't stopped anybody on defense, new quarterback and all that. But if you're trying to get off that goose egg, any opportunity like this against, frankly, a wounded team, they'll come in here firing away, I would think.
Absolutely, just as they did last year. I agree. The Titans had come off a pretty good win on the road last year, and we're starting to look ahead a little bit. Maybe we're still in the playoff race. And Jacksonville, that was actually the start of a good run for the Jaguars. They wound up with 4 wins in their last 8 games. So I think you'll see something similar. It'll be interesting to see Blake Bortles this year, one of the certainly the top picks in the draft for the Jaguars. He started the last few games. I think he's shown some flash, but also 6 interceptions in 3 games. So what, you've seen the NFL certainly a number of times. What happens to a rookie quarterback? What can you do to a rookie quarterback that maybe you couldn't do against a veteran?
There are a lot of theories there. Jim Schwartz, when he was defensive coordinator here, we assumed, or I assumed, and I talked to Jim about it, well, if you got a rookie, you throw all these blitzes at him. And he said, no. You rush and fall back in coverage and make him read coverage because he can't do that, or he's not prepared to do it yet. So I think Ray Horton's got to make a call here. Do you mix it up, which seems to be his normal pattern, or do you play coverage? Now, playing coverage may be tough with a makeshift secondary and all that, but I think you do have to put the ball in Bortles' hands and make him beat you. If he can, I guess he can, but maybe I'm funny about this. I kind of like the Titans this week. I liked them last week, though, and look where it got me.
I agree. I thought they would win last week. I thought maybe about 2017 or so, I think, is what I picked, and it didn't work out. But, one thing, as we talked about before, they're going to need this week is more pressure on whether they do more blitzing or not, just more pressure in general. They started out this year 8 sacks in the first 2 games, 1 sack in the last 3 games. And there's some pretty big names outside linebacker for the Titans right now. Cam Wembley, Derek Morgan, Sean Phillips. They brought in Akeem Ayers, who was a former second-round pick last week. What are you saying that they're not able to get to the quarterback?
It's just not happening, and I don't know if that's players not knowing the scheme or players just not being able to get there. And that, to me, is the biggest area of concern because we knew, and we've talked about this and written about this, it was going to take a while for the Ray Horton defensive scheme to settle in. He said as long as 8 weeks, I think it should be shorter. But those guys, you watch Derek Morgan, and they're playing him up some downs rushing the passer. They're still not getting there. And in the NFL of 2014, if you don't get a pass rush, even the Blake Bortles rookies of the world are going to pick you apart. So, yeah, they've got to get there.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out this Sunday.
Come see me next Tuesday at Sleep Outfitters. If you have any questions, #Pollard Show.